You can feel the rope cutting into your wrists, rough and unyielding. The air in your cell is thick with a stench that's more than just mold. It's the slow rot of human despair. You're 19. In the last 2 years, you've done what kings and armies could not. You've crowned a nation. You've broken siege lines that seasoned generals called impenetrable. English commanders wake in the night, haunted by your name. But now they have you. Your head is shaven. The cold air prickles your scalp, 1,000 tiny needles. They dragged you through that humiliation, stripping you of everything, as if they could undo your victories by undoing you. Your armor is gone. Your voice, once enough to make soldiers charge, now echoes off stone and dies. The guards don't even look up when you speak. Today you signed a paper. The words are a blur, but you remember the shape of their meaning. Deny your saints. Call your voices demons. The visions that changed history, hallucinations. The mission you believed was from God, a delusion. And then, this, wear the dress. The suffocating, humiliating dress that erases the warrior and makes you a thing again. You thought you were saving your life. What you really did was step into the perfect snare. The cruelest part? They built it so you'd walk in willingly. This is the story of how Joan of Arc was murdered by law, how the most advanced legal machinery of the medieval world was turned against a teenage girl who never saw the cage until it closed. This isn't just a trial, it's the systematic destruction of a person, using the law as a weapon, and what happened to her in 1431 still echoes today. If you believe history matters, stay close, because this is a story the world tried to bury. Let's go back to 1429. You have to know who Joan was before they broke her, or you'll never understand how they did it. France is dying, not in metaphor but in fact. The 100 Years' War has been bleeding the country dry for generations. Imagine it, a century of war, 100 years of your homeland being carved up, castle by castle, town by town. The south is English, the north is English, the coast is English. Your king sits in Bourges, uncrowned, watching his kingdom wither like a corpse in the sun. The war isn't just draining gold anymore, it's drained hope. Commanders believe the English are unbeatable. Nobles cut deals with the enemy. Parents teach their children that French victory is a fairy tale. This isn't a war, it's an occupation, dressed up as one. Then, in January 1429, a girl walks into the Dauphin's court. She's from Domremy, a village so small most scholars couldn't find it on a map. She can't read, she's never held a sword. Her name is Joan, and she tells Charles she's been sent by God to save France. Most dismiss her as mad, but she isn't mad. She's something more dangerous. She's certain. She tells the Dauphin exactly what he needs to hear, that God hasn't abandoned France, that the English will be driven out, that there's meaning in the suffering. He lets her ride with his armies. What happens next breaks every rule of medieval war. Joan at the siege of Orleans, the last vital stronghold in English hands. For months, the English have held it with a few thousand hardened soldiers. The French have battered themselves against its walls and failed, again and again. Then Joan arrives, and something shifts. It's not her tactics, it's belief. When she rides toward the walls, men follow, not because of orders, but because her presence makes failure impossible. And somehow, impossibly, it isn't. Orleans falls. The English commander is captured. The impossible becomes real. One victory, then another, then another. In May 1429, Joan stands beside Charles as he is crowned King of France at Reims. She's in armor. The crowds roar. This isn't just a coronation, it's proof. A 19-year-old peasant girl has rewritten what's possible. She's shown a nation that the English can be beaten. She's given back hope. She's illiterate. She's never held a sword. Her name is Joan, and she tells Charles that she's been sent by God to save France. Most people dismiss her as insane, but she's not insane. She's something worse. She's confident. She tells the Dan exactly what he needs to hear. That God hasn't abandoned France, that the English will be driven out, that there's a purpose to all this suffering. He lets her ride with his armies. What happens next breaks every law of medieval warfare. Joan at the siege of Olon, the most important stronghold left in English hands. For months, the English have held it with barely 5,000 soldiers. But English soldiers, experienced, battle-hardened, the French have thrown everything at Olon and bounced off like arrows off stone. Then Joan arrives and something changes. It's not that she fights differently, it's that the soldiers believe differently. When she rides toward those walls, they follow her, not because she's given a tactical order, but because something in her presence says, this will not fail. And somehow, miraculously, it doesn't, or falls. The English commander is captured. The impossible becomes possible. One victory, then another, then another. In May 1429, Joan stands beside Charles as he's crowned King of France at Reims. She's wearing armor. The crowds are screaming. This isn't just a religious coronation anymore, it's a validation. A 19-year-old peasant girl has fundamentally rewritten what is possible. She's proven to an entire nation that the English are not invincible. She's given back something that seemed lost forever: hope. By summer 1429, Joan of Arc is the most powerful person in France. Not officially. Officially, Charles is the king. But everyone knows the truth. The girl who hears voices from Saint S is the reason France isn't dead yet. The English realize this too, and they begin making plans not to defeat her in battle. She's proven they can't do that. She's blessed, or if you're cynical, she's got luck that defies mathematics. No, they're going to destroy her in a courtroom because there's one place Joan's divine mandate doesn't work: inside the architecture of theology and law. In May 1430, Joan is leading troops at Compiègne, a small town near the border between French and Burgundian territory. The Burgundians are technically French nobles, but they've been English allies since the Treaty of Troyes. They're playing both sides, and everyone knows it. A Burgundian soldier nabs Joan during a skirmish. It's almost mundane. One moment she's on horseback rallying troops, the next she's dismounted, surrounded, captured. It should have been the end of the story. A prisoner of war, maybe ransomed, maybe traded, maybe released, but it wasn't. Instead, the Burgundians sold her 10,000 levers to the price of a saint. That's the price of the woman who single-handedly changed the course of European warfare. For context, that sum of money could feed a family for 2 centuries. It's not just ransoming a prisoner of war. It's a sale, a transaction. The English aren't buying a girl, they're buying an icon they need to destroy. Here's what's fascinating. Joan isn't valuable because she's a military threat anymore. She's valuable because she's a symbol. She's proof that God favors Fran. She's living evidence that the English occupation can fail. If they can prove she's a fraud, that her voices are demonic, that her visions are delusions, that she's a witch working dark magic, then they haven't just killed a soldier, they've killed an idea. They've made her testimony against herself. They've used her own mouth to recant everything she was. In January 1431, Joan arrives in Rouen, the English stronghold, the military capital of English-occupied France. The trial that follows is supposed to be a religious investigation, ecclesiastical court, bishops, theologians, church law. It all has the appearance of legitimacy, but it's a show trial. Every aspect of it is choreographed. Joan is held in chains, not in a convent with nuns as church law requires, but in a military fortress with 5 English soldiers guarding her 24/7. The courtroom is filled with pro-English judges. The prosecutor is working directly with English military command. Her advocates are actually judges in disguise, arguing against her instead of for her, and they're prepared to destroy her systematically. For 70 sessions, 70 separate court hearings over months, they hammer at her. The brightest theologians in France versus a 19-year-old girl who cannot read or write. She has no lawyer, she has no advisor, she's alone. But here's the thing, she's winning, not in an official sense, she's never going to convince these judges, but she's winning in a way that matters more. She's winning in the court. of human intelligence. When they ask if she knows she's in God's grace, a classic theological trap designed so any answer condemns you, she delivers one of the most perfect responses in the history of language. If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God so keep me. They ask if God hates the English. She answers, of the love or hate God may have for the English, I know nothing. But I do know that they will all be driven from France except those who die here. It's not defiant, it's not reckless, it's perfect. She's outsmarting men who spent 20 years in universities. She's quoting scripture back at theologians. She's parrying every theological trap they set. They threaten her with torture, show her the instruments, the rack, the strappado, devices designed to systematically dislocate your joints while keeping you alive long enough to suffer. She looks at them and says, truly, if you were to tear my limbs from me and drive my soul from my body, I would not tell you anything more. And then the critical part, and if I did say anything, I would later declare that you had forced me to say it. She's telling them that confessions extracted through torture are worthless. She understands legal process better than they do. She understands that they can break her body, but her testimony will always be compromised. They'd back down. They can't torture her, so they switch tactics. If they can't break her through theology or torture, they'll break her through fear and exhaust. Ion, they're going to kill her, but not yet. Not before she signs something. May 24th, 1431. You're dragged out of your cell for the last time. You don't know it's the last time, but your body knows something has shifted in how the guards touch you. There's finality in their grip. They bring you to the cemetery of Santo, a public place, a square. Hundreds of people are already gathered. No, thousands. Word has spread that this is the day Joan burns. There's a scaffold with 2 preachers on it. Bishop Pierre Couchon is there. The man running the trial, the man who's been orchestrating your destruction. He's pro-English, he's ambitious, he's been trying to become Archbishop of Rouen for years, and the English have made it clear. Condemn Joan, and the position is yours. He's going to preach at you now. A final sermon condemning you as a heretic, a witch, a danger to Christendom. But first, they give you a choice. A notary steps forward. He has a document, he explains it. Or rather, a short version is read aloud. You'll renounce your visions. You'll admit your voices are demonic. You'll agree to wear women's clothing and obey the church. And if you sign it, your life will be spared. You'll go to prison instead of to the stake. There's an executioner standing right next to the pile of wood. You can see it stacked, dry, ready. You're terrified, you're exhausted. You've been in chains for months. You've been interrogated for 70 sessions. Your body is fragile. Your mind is ring thin. And you sign. Later, witnesses at Joan's rehabilitation trial, held 25 years after her death, would testify that the document they actually saw her mark was only a few lines long. They testify that the full confession the court produced afterward was fabricated, expanded, revised, made more damning than what she actually signed. They'd claim what happened in that moment was a kind of ecclesiastical sleight of hand. She signed something brief and desperate. What they filed in the records was something comprehensive and damning, but in the end it didn't matter. The trap wasn't the text, it was the act of signing. They march her back to prison. The crowd murmurs. Some are relieved she wasn't burned. Some are disappointed. The spectacle is over, but not in the way anyone expected. She's going to live. Condemned, but alive. Bishop Couchon preaches his sermon anyway, finishing what he started, condemning her from the scaffold while she's already surrendered. The performance continues. She's locked back in her cell. Now, here's where the truth gets colder than the stone around her. Joan believes she saved her life. She believes that the promise was real, life in prison. That's the deal she made, but her cantors never intended to honor it. See, there are rules in inquisitorial law, medieval religious law. If you're tried for heresy and you confess, you can be spared the death penalty. You get prison. Life imprisonment, yes, but life. It's mercy technically, but there's a say. Con category that has no mercy. Relapsed heresy. If you're a heretic who repents and then goes back to heresy, if you relapse, you're automatically handed over to secular authorities to be executed. No trial, no second chance. The relapse itself is the death sentence. The English and Bishop Cochon needed her dead, but they needed her dead as a relapsed heretic, because if they just executed her for the initial heresy charge, it would look like they'd broken the deal. It would look like murder. It would look like the law itself was a lie. But if she relapsed, if she went back to heresies after signing the confession, then everything was her fault. The law worked perfectly. She had a chance at mercy and threw it away. They engineered the perfect trap. They took her right back to the same military fortress. She was still in chains, still surrounded by 5 English soldiers 24/7. They shaved her head as humiliation. They made her wear the dress that she was promised would save her, but that actually made her catastrophically vulnerable. For months, Joan's men's clothing had been her armor, not metaphorically, literally. She testified during the trial that she tied her breeches and tunic with dozens of tight cords, binding them together so tightly they couldn't be removed without destroying the fabric. It was armor against sexual assault. It was protection in a room full of hostile men. Witnesses at her later rehabilitation trial would confirm that English lords had attempted to rape her in her cell. The cords in her clothes were the only thing stopping it. Now she was in a dress, vulnerable, exposed, and she was in a room with 5 male soldiers. The taunts started, the threats started, the promises that if she didn't cooperate, worse things would happen. 4 days passed, 4 days of this, then something happened that would seal her fate. One night, and here's where the testimony of the rehabilitation trial becomes absolutely critical. The guards took her dress, they took it. She was left with only the men's clothes they had thrown at her in a sack. They gave her an impossible choice: face the soldiers naked and alone, or put on the forbidden clothes. She chose safety. On May 28th, 4 days after her confession, 4 days into this arrangement, the judges came to her cell. Bishop Cochon walked in, the other judges filed in behind him. They found her in men's clothes. Joan told them exactly what happened. She explained that the dress had been taken, that she couldn't defend herself in a dress among men, that she had no choice. But here's what mattered. She also admitted something else. She said her voices had returned, that Saints Michael and Gabriel had come back to her, calling her a traitor for signing the abjuration, that she never should have renounced them. That was it. That was the moment the trap slammed completely shut. By her own testimony in the judge's presence in front of witnesses, she had returned to wearing men's clothing, explicit violation of the confession, and admitted her voices had returned. Admission of relapsed heresy. The verdict was immediate, unanimous, no deliberation. She was officially a relapsed heretic. The promise of life had lasted exactly 4 days. Here's the truly diabolical part. Joan didn't understand what had happened. She thought she was being honest. She thought she was explaining her circumstances. She had no idea she was reading a death sentence into the record with her own words. She didn't realize that the judges had engineered a scenario where she had to choose between her safety and her survival. They took away the dress knowing she'd put on the clothes. They left the soldiers in her cell knowing what would happen. They counted on her fear, and they counted on her honesty, and they weaponized both against her. The English didn't need to torture her. They didn't need to break her will through theology. They just needed to set up the right circumstance and let her human need for basic safety destroy her. It's elegant if you think about it. It's evil, but it's elegant. May 30th, 1431. 800 English soldiers escorted her to the old market square in Rouen. The pea was tall, ready. They prepared it well. The wood was seasoned so it would burn hot and fast. They didn't want this to drag out. They wanted her dead before she could say much more. They stripped her. They dressed her in a white smoke. They put a paper hat on her head that read, "Heretic, relapsed, apostate, idolator." She asked, Ed for a crucifix. Her friar gave her one made of sticks lashed together with string. Just 2 pieces of wood and some binding, but it was Christ. It was enough. She climbed onto the P. They chained her to the stake, not loosely, tightly. They wanted to make sure she couldn't fall, couldn't try to escape, couldn't do anything but stand there and burn. The executioner lit the fire. The wood caught immediately. And here's what witnesses reported. She didn't scream. She didn't curse her judges. She didn't rage against God or the English or the unfairness of any of it. Instead, she called out to the man who had orchestrated her destruction. "Bishop Cushon, I die through you." It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact. It was her testifying to the truth one last time, even as the flames consumed her. Then she did something that would haunt the consciences of everyone watching. She asked someone to hold the crucifix up high so it would be the last thing she saw. A simple request, a dying woman wanting to look at Christ while she burned. And as the smoke grew thick, as the heat became unbearable, witnesses reported hearing her voice above the roar of the flames, crying out over and over, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." Not once, over and over. The name repeated like a prayer, like a promise, like the only true thing left in a world that had become entirely corrupted. The crowd watched this, thousands of them, French people who had cheered her, who had been saved by her, who were now watching her burn, English soldiers who had orchestrated her death, priests who had condemned her, nobility who said nothing. And then something happened that the English hadn't anticipated. An English secretary, a man who had been part of the trial, part of the machinery that condemned her, watched as her body blackened in the flames, watched as the fire consumed the peasant girl who had threatened an empire, and he apparently cried out in the marketplace, "We are lost, for we have burned a saint." They did everything they could to make sure her legacy would die with her. After her body was completely charred, they ran back the coals to show the crowd her remains, proof that she was a woman, proof that she hadn't somehow magically escaped, proof that she was dead. Then they burned the corpse again. And again they kept burning until only ash remained. Then they gathered what little was left and threw it into the river Seine. They were trying to make sure that not even her dust could become a relic, not even her bones could be venerated. They wanted her completely, utterly erased. But something the English didn't account for was already in motion. 25 years later, Joan's family demanded a retrial. The Pope authorized it. And in this rehabilitation trial, over 100 witnesses were called, priests who had been in the courtroom, judges who had voted to condemn her, guards who had been in her cell, notaries who had recorded documents, soldiers who had guarded her. And they testified on their oath in front of the Pope's representative. They testified to the truth. They testified that Joan's confession had been manufactured, that the document she actually signed was nothing like what was filed in court records, that her imprisonment violated church law, that the guards had been systematically abusive, that her guards had taken her dress, forcing her into an impossible choice, that the entire trial was corruption from start to finish. The rehabilitation trial declared the original verdict a complete fraud. Joan's name was cleared. The church officially recognized her virtue. Within a century, she was canonized as a saint. The English had burned a saint, and history proved it. But here's the thing that should chill you in ways that historical facts usually don't. Joan of Arc didn't die in a moment of weakness or spiritual failure. She didn't die because she renounced God or betrayed her mission. She died because she trusted the law. She died because she believed that there were rules that would protect her. She died because she signed a document thinking it would save her life. And the document was the trap. The system that killed her wasn't incompetent or chaotic. It was perfectly efficient. It had multiple fail-safes. Even when its theological assault failed, even when it couldn't break her through rhetoric, it had a backup plan. It had constructed a scenario where being human, needing safety, fearing rape, trying to stay alive would become evidence of heresy. It weaponized her own fear against her. And here's why this story still matters, why it should unsettle you even now. The system that destroyed Joan hasn't vanished, it just changed its shape. Today, it's not always fire in a public square, it's not always a scaffold or a stake, but the machinery is still there, coerced confessions twisted into evidence, legal traps where telling the truth becomes proof of guilt, systems designed so you can't win, where defending yourself is called defiance, where asking for safety is treated as a crime, where transparency is used as a weapon against you. Joan of Arc didn't die because she was weak or foolish or wrong. She died because she was caught in a system built to break her, a machine that left no way out. She signed that paper because she wanted to live, and that simple human hope was turned into the very thing that condemned her. That's the echo of 1431 that should haunt us, a world where survival itself can be twisted into guilt. You've just heard a truth history tried to erase, a story of a girl who saved a nation, only to be destroyed by the very system that claimed to stand for justice. If you believe history matters, if you think these stories deserve to be told honestly and completely, subscribe to Curious Historians, because the truth doesn't have to stay buried. Joan of Arc was declared a saint. Her judges were